I'm Goo.
And I am Mac.
And we are the Mac and Goo program, ready to bring you 7 hours of friendship.
Yeah, today we're bringing you some forced friendship, and that, of course, is the forced friendship of one Deadpool, Wade Wilson, and Logan, Wolverine. And
Mhm.
boy, I'll tell you, um, this is one of those movies that, we get screeners often, we're able to see movies a few days, sometimes a week or two before the people's. This is the first one in a while that I am so excited we got to see before most other people.
Is this our most anticipated movie since Endgame?
It might be. It might be because of all the things that go into this movie and may come out of it going forward. And just the fact that, um, the MCU really hasn't gotten back to um, the level that we expect from it. And I think this movie finally gets up to a tier where I don't think they've reached since Endgame. You could argue one other movie might be up there as well, but it's
No Way Home?
yeah, yeah,
Another big tentpole movie. I
right,
would say
right.
that since Endgame, you've had 2 big tentpole movies, both very fan servicey, semi-gimmicky movies, and I'm gonna tip my hand right now, carrot sign facing this over No Way Home.
Yeah, totally agree. Not that it blows that out of the water, but this is
No,
better, more satisfying for us
I would call
anyways.
them very similar, though.
Similar structure for sure. It's just nice to go to a movie that you have been looking forward to for a couple years and not leaving disappointed. So little peek behind the curtain here. I was very pleased and very satisfied with this movie.
But also saying that, I have been in my thoughts. I have popped on the Professor X helmet the past couple of days and really, really thought this one out.
Okay.
And I needed to figure out what this movie was, what it was trying to accomplish, and it did that.
Yeah. Well, let's get into it then. Dead
Should we talk about the movie or should we tiptoe around it more?
Deadpool and Wolverine, I believe, is our 34th MCU movie. Now, I think we're up to like 10 or 11 shows, so somewhere around 45 properties overall in the MCU. And of course, Deadpool's first venture into the MCU, as well as Wolverine's first venture into the MCU. And this is a rated R action comedy and sci fi with a runtime of 127 minutes, so just over 2 hours. It's long enough. I do think you maybe could have cut a couple things, but you also could
Yeah.
have even expanded upon it. If this was 3 hours, I think they could have done even more cool shit. But for the most part, they struck to a cent- they stuck to a st- for the most part, they stuck to a central story. Whether
Mhm.
that story was the greatest or not, we'll talk about. And they didn't meander too far off of that path.
No, it's pretty cut and dry of first act, second act, third act, 3 locations pretty much,
Yeah, essentially. And of course, one
or
look.
3 worlds.
Yeah,
We're not gonna spoil
Yeah,
right now,
yeah.
but
One location in particular is obviously a big sandbox, the Void, and you can do whatever you want there.
it's a giant fucking sandbox.
Goo, currently on Rotten Tomatoes, this has 81% from the critics. We won't know an audience score for a couple days. It did open at 85%, which is right in the same range as the first two. Deadpool 1, 85% from the critics, 90% from the audience. Deadpool 2, 84% from the critics, 85% from the audience. And on Metacritic, this is a 54, Goo. That's low, but critics, they hate referencing other stuff. They hate, shared universes. The critics hate fun, Goo, is what the
I
critics
think
hate.
this movie has a lot working against it when it comes to, a critical eye on it and also trying to really evaluate it as a movie as opposed to a spectacle. Cuz I'm looking at it more like a spectacle and I hate to quote Martin Scorsese on this, but this movie truly is a great amusement park ride.
Yeah, it's an
And it's a
experience.
wonderful roller coaster. It's an experience,
Yeah.
but when looking at it as a standalone movie, I can see where people might have gripes with it.
Yeah, the story admittedly isn't great, and not even the story, the motivations for a character and then the actions of another, I have questions about, and obviously the critics are going to have more questions than we do. To relate just to the first two movies, the first one got a 65 on Metacritic. The second one got a 66. So they're essentially saying this one is a tier lower as a movie.
Mhm.
Now, maybe people would agree there because of, the story, but as an event, as a spectacle, this
Yes.
is vastly superior to the first
Look,
two.
I'm not going to this movie for the story, for how they wrap it up, for the villain. I am going for the friendship, the camaraderie, and finally getting a full movie of Deadpool and Wolverine. And in that aspect, they pay it off.
Yeah, they really do. Very several
If you want to look at everything else, maybe you might have issue.
many satisfying things in here. A lot of
Yes.
fun. There's just we'll get to that. We'll get to the old octagon in a few. But they do their job, that's for sure.
This podcast might meander more than others because there are a lot of thoughts, and I want to make sure that I get them all out there. Because, and granted, this movie's not 3 hours long like Endgame, but I think we did 2.5 podcasts on that.
And if you're just tuning in for a rapid reaction before you go to the movie and you're going to listen to the rest afterwards, I'll tell you right now, one post credit, not
Yes.
really meaningful going forward, but is funny for the movie.
Pays off something from the movie,
Yes.
pays off a joke
Yeah,
from the movie.
but no mid credit, one post credit.
Yeah.
Dude, this movie, speaking of this movie, is written by Ryan Reynolds. It's written by Ryan Reynolds, whose only other writing credit was Deadpool 2. Upcoming Goo, he has something called Boy Band he has written, which is
Mm.
interesting, especially considering some of the music in this movie. Also written by Rhett Reese and Paul Wernick. They are a writing team, I think, or get one credit. So Goo, there's 5 writing credits on this movie, but I think because they are a writing team, they only get 1 essentially. Because you're
They have to
only
share a paycheck?
because I think you're only allowed up to 4, correct?
I don't know the
As
rules.
SAG goes.
You are asking me questions I have no
You are
idea
a
about.
SAG member. Uh,
Don't ask.
Reese and Warnick, their movies have been pretty good for the most part. They did Zombieland, GI Joe Retaliation, Deadpool Life, Deadpool 2, Zombieland Double Tap, Six Underground, Spiderhead, and Ghosted. So they've really jumped into the Netflix world the last couple of years. Goo, this team was also the creators of, I think, one of the best reality television shows ever, the Joe Schmo Show. That was a hell of, I think they brought it back for Hulu or Prime or something. But the original season of the Joe Schmo Show, incredible, incredible
Is
television.
Joe Schmo better than Joe Millionaire?
Uh Man, Joe Millionaire is pretty fucking good too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because who would ever wanna be with a fucking construction worker? A handsome construction worker.
They were also the creators on the show Twisted Metal, which was on, I believe, Paramount last year, which was
Mhm.
a surprisingly fun show. Upcoming for these two, they're doing the Clue remake and also the Watchdog movie. Watchdog, it will be based on that video game. The third writing credit here goes to Zeb Wells, who you'd really only know from Robot Chicken, of course, probably brought in for some of the comedy writing, some of the comedy lines. He also did, or she, I don't know who that is. They did one episode of She-Hulk, so there was maybe the initial Marvel tie-in. Upcoming, they're doing an episode of the Marvel Zombies miniseries, and
Mhm.
also a show called Star Wars Detours. I don't Is Detours going to be like a what if type of show? Is that, do we know?
Or maybe it's just off to the side, it's not focusing on our Skywalker,
Okay.
Rey story,
our
it's
our
gonna
main our
yes.
sacred timeline, for lack of a better term. And then finally, this is Shawn Levy's first writing credit. He's been a director for many years. His first writing credit on this movie, and of course, these characters Goo are based on the characters created by Rob Liefeld and
Mhm.
Fabian Nicieza. Nicieza.
Necieza.
And of course, directed by Levy. You would know him, and he kind of got his start in the Nickelodeon world. He directed episodes of Secret World of Alex Mack, many from the famous Jet Jackson. He directed Big Fat Liar, Just Married, Cheaper by the Dozen, the Night at the Museum trilogy. I think that's really where he made his money. Date Night, a disappointment. Real Steel, underrated. Also did that with
Hugh Jackman.
Jackman. Yep.
Yeah.
The Internship. He's also done 8 episodes of Stranger Things. He, of course, directed Free Guy with Reynolds, as well as The Adam Project. Upcoming, he is going to be directing that Reynolds boy band movie. He's also got something called Starman on the horizon, and is also a director for one of the episodes in the final season of Stranger Things.
2 things. Number 1, famous Jet Jackson was Disney, Don't say
Oh,
multiple
sorry. Sorry,
Nickelodeons. Come
sorry,
on.
sorry.
So, everyone at home,
Yeah.
calm down. We have fixed it. I know that you are up in arms about that. Also, are you sure it's Big Fat Liar and not Agent Cody Banks?
No. Even though I looked at IMDb, I'm still not sure. No.
Max spent 30 minutes of his prep time making sure which Frankie Muniz
Vehicle.
project Levy worked on.
Goose, synopsis for Deadpool and
Yes.
Wolverine. I also had to piece this synopsis together because there wasn't a particularly good one out there. Deadpool's peaceful existence comes crashing down when the Time Variance Authority, aka TVA, recruits him to help safeguard the multiverse. In order to
Yes.
save his own world, Deadpool teams up with Wolverine to defeat a common enemy.
Okay, so I think that might be where some critics also don't love it, where we are once again dealing with multiverse stuff.
Sure.
A lot of people have set sail on the multiverse movie going.
That's fair. Now, as two viewers of 45 MCU properties in all of the original Marvel Studios movies, this is the other way. It's like very fulfilling and like really hits on notes that someone that didn't watch, the Wolverine, it won't hit the same for them, So it's got its pluses and minuses. That's why like so 81% of the critics said yes, good movie. I wonder if the audience score is going to be like 96. I think it's going to be very high.
I'm curious how much of the audience is also sick, and they even make jokes about it in the movie that everybody is sick of the variants, everyone is sick of the multiverse stuff, but here we are anyways, but they also needed it to tell this story,
Yep,
so
very true. Uh, this movie stars, of course, Ryan Reynolds as Wade Wilson slash
time
Deadpool.
out here. That might be something else that is working against this movie when it, some people who have Ryan Reynolds fatigue, and when
Okay.
you are dealing with the Deadpool movie, who stars
Yeah,
in those
right.
movies?
Well, Ryan Reynolds, it's a good point, Goo. Yeah,
Mhm.
really, really strong point there. Also, Hugh Jackman, co-star as Logan slash Wolverine. And I'll say this, and we'll talk about it at length. Um, he was unbelievable.
Yes.
It was so good as Ryan Reynolds is as Deadpool, and they've sort of become synonymous. Hugh Jackman as Wolverine is just a different level. Like there's
Yeah.
very few characters that have approached that level. So I'll
And then also, I don't know how much control he has over this, but I thought that he was also a very good sport when it came to like the jokes, not only about his character, but about him in general.
yeah, for sure. For sure. And and as much as we all like Reynolds, I think there's a couple emotional moments in this movie you're like, wow, Hugh Jackman's a fucking amazing actor. And it really showed in this movie. Emma Corrin is introduced here as Cassandra Nova, the villain, I suppose the main villain of the movie. You have Matthew McFadden as Mr. Paradox. Morena Baccarin returns as Vanessa. Rob Delaney as Peter. Leslie Uggams as Blind Al. Karen Sony as Dopinder. Brianna Hildebrand as Negasonic Teenage Warhead. Shioli Kutsana as Yukio. Stefan Kapicic as Colossus. Louis Tan as Shatterstar. Randall Reeder as Buck. That's the gentleman that wasn't allowed to speak. Tyler.
That was good. It made me laugh.
We had a couple cameos that were in the trailer.
These are the only cameos
Yeah.
that we're going to say right now before we get to spoilers, because these two, I believe, were in 2 or 3 of the
Featured
teasers, and we'll get
prominently.
into that in a
Yeah.
second too. But
Featured
yeah.
prominently in the trailers. You had Aaron Stanford as Pyro and Tyler Main as Sabretooth. And then, of course, Goo, you have Peggy the dog as Dogpool, aka Mary Poppins.
hmm So, Mac, I ask you, is this the funniest fan service movie that we have gotten?
It very well might be. Just as a theater experience in general, it's one of the most fun times I've ever had. The only thing I could come up with off the top of the dome, there might be a couple I'm not thinking of that was more fun in the moment. Borat when we were fucking 16, 17
But that
years old.
wasn't fan
No,
service.
no, I'm
That
just
was
talking
just
in general theater experiences.
yes.
That tops this, but short of that, man, this is right up there. It was such a blast.
Because even if you are going into this as like a cynic, being like, I don't want them just to spoon feed me all these member berries. And yes, there are points in this movie where I was even like, well, that's a bit much. But it's 25 years of not only movies, because we've already seen movies referenced in other movies, but it's inside jokes. It's movie company turnover, and it's Hollywood rumor mill stuff that even if you're just watching the movies, you're not getting half the jokes.
Right.
Like, it's stuff that if you are a fanboy or fangirl of these properties, follow all the news about these movies, you get payoffs to certain things that if you aren't keeping up with all the current news with superhero movies, you're going to miss some things and you'll have to have it explained to you after.
Yeah, I also do think though that someone who's a casual viewer of the MCU and hasn't seen anything can watch this and still really enjoy it because a lot of the referential stuff goes back to pre-MCU stuff.
No,
And
I'm
that,
aware
and
of
in
that,
that case, most people have seen those movies, you know?
but I'm saying it's beyond just the movies.
Yeah,
It's the stuff off the movies that, like I just said, even if you're going into it being like, I don't want all these things, it's references that are there for you.
sure.
And you
Yeah.
are being paid off for following all this crap for 25 years.
Now here's a question for you. Is it the
Yes.
funniest MCU movie?
It might
It
be.
might
Now
be.
that it's in the MCU, I think this
It might be.
because Ragnarok is really
That's
funny.
the other one I'm
The
thinking
first
of.
Guardians is really funny.
Yep. Yep.
I
That as
guess it
well. Yep.
depends. Do you prefer the Ryan Reynolds style of comedy, or do you prefer Taika Waititi? At least Taika Waititi 5-ish years ago before some people grew sour on him.
Yeah, and the difference between the two, I guess, to maybe help the listener if they're trying to delineate,
One is from New Zealand, one is from Canada.
a lot of the humor in this movie is quoting other movies or referencing other movies, much the way Deadpool does. Whereas James Gunn and Taika Waititi, that humor is humor you might quote in the future going forward,
Yes.
you know? So that's the difference there. So I guess you could argue there is a funnier movie or two, but this is in the conversation, and I would probably say it is the funniest.
Because I think that I lolled several times
I
at this
cackled.
movie.
I there was one
Like, there was a couple jokes that I really did lose it.
There was one single
Mhm.
word that made me laugh for about a minute straight.
They also do something in this, and I always love this, is someone finishes, like, a conversation, and then the other person jumps back 2 conversations ago to be like, "Wait, why the fuck did you say this?"
Yeah,
And that always because that's how people talk, like, they just
right.
kinda listen, 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 and then they go, "Wait a second, why did you say
Yeah,
this?
half listening, and then your mind finally clicks. You're like, "Wait, what the fuck did you
Wait,
just say?"
what?
Yeah.
What'd you say to me?" Mac, so like we talked about earlier with No Way Home, is this the most fun pants tenty MCU movie that we've gotten since Endgame?
Yeah, I think it is for sure. Now, I think if you're a huge Spider-Man guy, maybe you lean that over this.
Yeah.
But I'm a huge Wolverine guy, so I lean this over that as much as I do like Spider-Man. I just felt like um this was rough. This was a longer time coming because we've been talking about this forever.
Yeah.
Whereas in No Way Home,
Yes.
we had a good Spider-Man already. It wasn't like we needed to get back to it. We
No,
had
but
it
so
and maybe
that
had the
movie
best
though,
one.
I think that movie though had better redemption for one of the Spider-Men.
Sure.
So like
Sure.
in this one, you don't walk away going, "Man, I wish that we got more of this person."
Yep.
In that movie, you say, "Did we not give Andrew Garfield enough credit?"
Yeah, probably. So that I mean that is a distinction to make between the two. And that movie is obviously much more serious than this one as well.
I was gonna say, and that one took itself way more serious. This one went into it being like, "Look, we're gonna give you a spectacle for the eyes and ears."
I also feel like, of course, this story isn't perfect or great. The
No.
strange stuff in that movie really bothered me. I don't know if
So,
there's anything in this
yes,
movie that really bothers me.
because they weren't taking it as serious in this movie, things didn't bother me
Yeah,
because they were still trying to continue a story and build upon the whole Marvel universe in that movie. You kind of nitpick at things being like, I don't like this, I don't like this, I don't like this.
for
Whereas
sure.
this one, it almost feels like a standalone. Like it's in the Marvel universe, but it's kind of just off on its own. And while I don't love where the villain ends up, or even the secondary villain, it's like secondary stuff to me.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's the downfalls of this movie, I think, are far overshadowed by what it does well and what it does great and what we've been anticipating. And that's another thing. that goes along with this as well. Like, we also anticipated a lot in No Way Home, and on the MCU Strange side of stuff, it fell short.
Yeah.
This didn't have to deal with that, like, really at all.
Do we just like Strange too much and he just keeps disappointing us?
It's possible
The
because
character keeps
yeah,
disappointing
oh
us.
for his last
He's
2.
doing this to us.
Yeah.
Doctor Strange owes us an apology. Mac, I have had that Madonna song stuck in my head for months. Like a dream.
It's it was a this movie does a great job at music. It is very topical and referential even when it comes to the music. They did a good job picking the songs they used too, including that
Uh,
Madonna song.
so in this, they don't go with Nexus beings, which is a character that is a part of all worlds and whatnot. They go with anchor characters.
Yeah, so this it's different. It's completely
Yes.
different. A Nexus being is someone who's like beyond a next level,
Yes.
is obviously vital to the universe, but vital to all the universes.
Scarlet Witch.
Yeah, whereas this, they introduce anchor characters, which might be a variant of one character, and they give us this concept of which was easy enough for me to buy into, I suppose. Maybe some people had issue with this, is if the anchor character dies in that world or that universe, the
They don't
universe
matter anymore.
crumbles.
The cops say they don't matter.
Yeah, the
That's the
universe
end.
crumbles a little bit. So, and you know what, in that respect, it mimicked um uh be across the Spider-Verse a little bit,
Yeah.
in that they had these sort of anchor events. I forget what they called them, and if that event didn't happen, the world collapses. It was just somewhat similar to that.
The movie also establishes that Deadpool is on Earth 10,005. That's how they refer to it.
10,000 plus 5. So would it be, hold on here. It would be 100,005.
Yeah. Which is the same universe that Logan, the movie Logan, is on.
Yep.
But that doesn't mean that it's on the same world that the original X-Men were on.
No, it means specifically it's not actually.
Right. Exactly. That's what I was trying to get at.
Yeah, we established that the Deadpool we've known and the Deadpool through these last 3 movies, even though we saw some X-Men cameos, does not operate in the same world either as the original X-Men trilogy or as in the X-Men trilogy that we got in the 2010s. It's in a completely separate world, and in this world is where the movie Logan happened. So,
Yes.
Logan X-23 exists in the same world as Deadpool.
All right. And the next question, we are going to move to your sack. And that is, will this movie reinvigorate, which is what a lot of critics are saying, the MCU? We're going to save that for your sack. So
Ooh.
stick around.
Big market tease there.
Big market tease. How about instead we get to the nonagon?
Let's do it.
All right, Mac. Fun factor on this movie. And I think the fun factor is one of the big selling points. Action, blood, violence, jokes. I think very, very funny jokes. I think even beyond the references, this is still a very, very funny movie. And it's just fun. It's fun. It's fan fun. It's fan factor.
I totally agree. I have a really hard time coming up with a theater going experience, a movie seeing for the first time that was more fun than this one. And on top of it, and one thing you didn't mention that I just briefly mentioned, the music was incredibly fun too. Definitely tongue in cheek at points, but they had a lot of fun with the music as well.
Satisfactor. And while maybe some of the events of the movie aren't necessarily satisfactory, just getting Wolverine and Deadpool on the screen together, and a lot of it, it's not like, oh, sparingly. No, they're together for hour 45 of the movie, 2 hours of the movie.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd say probably close to 2 hours. Yeah.
So that is very satisfactory. I will say this, though, and I blame Disney for this. Putting so many spoilers in the trailers, like, I have no issue with people, digging through stuff and putting it on Reddit. And if people want to find that, that's absolutely fine with me. It's when Disney puts characters that would be amazing, satisfactory, just awesome cameos in there. When they put them in their trailers, that's annoying.
I hear your overall point, your general point there. I don't agree with you with this movie, and that's because I was pretty deep into that stuff and was purposefully doing that, and I still got 2 characters in here. One that I mostly expected, one I didn't expect at all. That was
Right.
so amazing and
I
so
know, but
satisfying.
There's one, and I don't even wanna say it right now because
Yeah,
some people were able to avoid trailers,
yeah.
but there's one character that if they didn't show in a trailer and they just popped them on us, I would have gotten chills.
Oh, I'm
But
not even
because I
talking
knew
about
about
that
it.
character.
What?
I'm not even talking about that
I
character.
know, but
We're
I'm
talking about
talking
different
about
ones.
that
Okay,
character.
all
I
right,
am talking about that
all right,
character.
yeah. I don't agree with your point, but that's fair.
I don't agree with anything you've ever said, so how do you deal with that?
Yeah, but speaking on Satisfactor,
Yes.
uh, it was really, really satisfying to see Hugh Jackman back in this role because you think back to 2017's Logan, you thought
Mhm.
that was it. Then rumors started a couple years ago before they announced this movie that he would be coming back. And so that's a really long time in between seeing him as Wolverine. You know, I got my little Wolverine toys here.
Oh,
Obviously, noted Wolverine guy. Yeah, we might have the
you're gonna
same
be
little
be
guy.
toy boys over here?
So I wish he could play, and they joke about this in the movie. I wish he could play Wolverine forever because he's fucking perfect.
Yeah.
So it was really satisfying to see him back in that role. And also it was satisfying to see him be so vital to the plot of the movie and not just be the sidekick.
Right, and he has his own issues that he's dealing with and they're trying to figure out.
Mhm.
Borometer, it did take a little bit for me. It wasn't tip to tail excitement. There were parts where I was like, this is dragging a smidge. And it was really end of second, beginning of third, and then dealing with the final villain stuff.
Yeah, you know what? Maybe the worst part about this movie is the TVA and how they were represented and what they did, and there was a little
Mhm.
bit of bore surrounding TVA involved stuff. I
Yes.
will fully agree with you on that.
Aquator, it is better than 2017's Aquaman.
Get that corn out of my
Sorry,
face.
Jason Momoa. Halloween, I actually believe that this movie will not wane over time. I have a feeling, because this is the first time in a while that I want to rewatch an MCU Marvel movie almost immediately.
Yeah, totally agree. It's the first movie in a while. I'm excited to watch like a new Rockstar's breakdown of stills and then the point out Easter eggs that I missed because I was having so much fun watching the movie that I surely missed stuff. And this is also the first Marvel movie in a while since maybe No Way Home that would be fun to watch with friends, knowing what's
Yeah.
coming and watching their reactions because that's going to be pretty satisfying.
By the way, I'm Team Screen Crush, Ryan Airy.
Yeah, I like new rock stars more. Screen Crush is solid. The British guy is which one is
Heavy
that?
spoilers.
Heavy spoilers. They're okay.
I don't love them.
They're not as entertaining.
I go Screen Crush, New Rock Stars, then Heavy Spoilers, but I almost sometimes Ryan Airy does enough to cover for both of them.
I like new rock stars number 1, but Screen Crush does a great job.
Mac, Pants, Tent City, Excite Bike Mania, and we really can't talk about them here because I don't want to spoil any. But like I said, one of the big selling points of this movie is the pants tents.
Yeah, it's essentially a movie that started with probably 4 or 5 pants tents and they just connected the tents along the way.
I was just gonna say, it does feel like they said, okay, we want or we need in this movie to
Yeah.
have these 10 things, and we don't care how you connect them.
Yeah, yeah. Which is again a little bit like No Way Home. They were like, "All right, going in, we know we got XYZ. Let's just connect those and see how the movie comes
No,
out."
but the issue, and I'm not trying to pile on No Way Home, but No Way Home had another responsibility
It did.
of getting us to another Spider-Man movie
Mhm.
and then getting us to more MCU
It
stuff.
had more responsibility for sure.
This movie, they could wrap it up here and that's it.
Yeah, you're right.
Is that a spoiler?
No.
Okay. Mac, when life gives you lemons, you make lemonade. And I will talk about mine in spoilers. My first one, because I think this guy absolutely stole the show.
Oh, I we have the same point
Yes.
here on this one. It was just ugh, talk about satisfying fun factor. It was everything rolled into one, and
Yeah.
I can't praise the person who played the role enough.
Mac's Credit Union. You deserve so much credit, Mac. Who are you giving credit to?
Again, I'm gonna harp on it maybe for the rest of my life. Jackman in this role is perfect, and specifically in this movie, he gives it that emotional gravitas that it was kind of missing. As I think we've had a little bit of trouble with the emotions in the past couple Deadpool movies. I think this has a better emotional center than those two movies do, which takes this movie up a notch from those two. Of course, you do feel for Wade and what he's gone through, but because Deadpool is the character he is, I just think it's inherently a little less emotional. There's a couple monologues, but specifically one, probably about halfway through this movie, a Jackman monologue that was unbelievable. Like he speaks for like 2 straight minutes, and it's fucking incredible.
I'll give credit to both of them because those two truly carry the movie.
And you know what? Like, it's hard to not give credit to Reynolds, like kind of almost stepping back and being the secondary star in his own franchise. So you gotta give him credit for that.
For those of you tardy to the Mac and Goo party, we rate everything on a 40 hot dog rating system. Mac, the floor is yours.
We can't underscore how much of a fucking blast this movie is. It just was such a fun theater experience. And again, I'm wanting my friends to see this so we can talk about it and talk about some of the references and cameos. But also, again, the story isn't the best. It's
Yeah.
right off the top. But the combination of the characters that we get in here and the fight scenes and the tentpole scenes, this is my most enjoyable theater experience in a long, long time. Jackson Jackman's monologues, especially the one in the Honda Odyssey that I referenced a minute ago, before there's this big moment, adds to the depth and emotion that this movie absolutely needed. Without those, this movie just wouldn't have hit as hard, or maybe would have fallen flat. Who knows? But back to the story. The Paradox character kind of sucked. Kind
Yeah.
of sucked. It was really hard to believe what was going on at the TVA if you were someone that watched Loki season 2. It just didn't quite jive with the TVA that we ended up with at the end of season 2. To me, it really didn't make a lot of sense how there was like no oversight for to not get into spoilers yet. It just didn't make a lot of sense to me. We can talk about that in a few as well. We're introduced to Cassandra Nova in this movie as the main bad guy, the main villain. I think for the most part, people were like me when it comes to her. We just knew that she was Charles's twin and like died in the womb. He killed her in the womb. And that's all you really need to know about her. You don't need to know anything more going in, which was good. Her powers were sweet. The visuals on her powers, like with the hands and the fingers and the head, were fucking awesome. I
She's
loved
also
that.
bald, so Mac is
Yeah.
always going to side with the baldies.
But again, when it comes to story, what she ends up doing, I didn't think was great. I
Yeah.
thought her motivations were good. I could see why she was motivated to do something. What she chooses to do, I didn't love. I thought that
And
was
not to
meh.
step on you, but her motivations were super generic.
I, there was a little bit of a tie-in and twist in there that I thought the motivation was good enough. But again,
Okay.
I don't like how that played out. Um, a note too is you probably need to have seen Logan for several scenes to really work for you in this movie. On top of maybe Loki season 2 and general Marvel knowledge. So, like we talked about already, maybe that drops it down for some people. But I also think you didn't really need any Deadpool knowledge from the other two movies going. Like, you understood immediately the impact of his friends and family. You didn't need to
Yeah.
know much more than that. Um, Also, speaking of Deadpool's friends and family, oy vey, Morena Baccarin. She is still looking very, very good.
Still hucking piss.
Goo, I have this at 37 hot dogs. I've got it number 8 in the MCU behind a pretty stacked top 7. I think it's either at the back end of tier 2 or at the top of tier 3 in those in that list of movies. Of course, the top tier would be the 340 doggers for me: Infinity War, Endgame, and Guardians, and then the next ones. I think this might be in that tier.
Mhm.
This is also very comfortably my number 2 movie of 2024 behind
Same.
Dune 2. There's a
Yeah.
gap between Dune 2 and this, and then there's a gap between this and everything else. I also think this is the best of the 3 Deadpool movies. I would understand why, and I think, just listening to our last 10, 15 minutes, I think a lot of people would understand why people might prefer those other 2 movies with maybe more coherent or better stories, better
Yeah.
Deadpool stories, maybe, because this does rely heavily on Logan/Wolverine stuff.
Slash cameos slash needing a bunch of other stuff. Mac, I will say this is that we are the right audience for this movie.
No doubt. No doubt.
That is playing a huge part of this because if you aren't the right audience for this movie, there are tons of things to pick apart. But for us, blood, guts, knives. I don't think I can say the next word, so
Yeah,
I'm
you
not
can.
gonna. I'm not gonna say sleuts.
Okay, fair enough.
That's an Eminem
I
song,
would
right?
have said it.
That's an Eminem song, right? That's a part of an
Sleuths?
Eminem song? You don't wanna fuck with
Shady.
Shady.
Why not? Because Shady
Shady
will
will
fucking
fucking
kill
kill
you.
you. Mac, I am still so mad at Disney for what they did with the cameos in the trailer, and I just like, they would have absolutely blasted my brain. But even saying that, I still had a blast with most of them, and the ones that I didn't love, they got him out of there pretty quick. They
Mm,
didn't waste their time on the cameos that they thought people didn't care about.
mhm.
I did feel like the ending was a bit too comic booky, a bit too generic, but when you look back at the other Deadpool movies, they sneaky have very generic endings too when they try to be like, "Well, we're not your daddy's comic book movie." But then they end up kind of being that just with an R rating.
Yeah, I actually think I have such a big issue with the first Deadpool movie because it does that for 2/3 of
Yeah.
it, and then the final third of it is like every comic book movie you've ever seen.
So I guess that it does carry on in the Deadpool trend of like the villains aren't great.
Yeah. But they also I'm glad you brought this up. The villains in the 3 movies haven't been great, but they also haven't been able to establish Deadpool in a broader universe and
Mhm.
establish this bigger rivalry with a bigger villain or bring in a bigger villain because they haven't had the rights to bigger villains. So
And
that's an issue there.
also, I think they've all had accents. Are they all British?
That's a strong point.
What
Yeah.
was Ajax? Was Ajax British? They've
Lot of
definitely all had
yeah,
accents.
you're right.
So, while I love Hugh Jackman and it's awesome seeing him in the suit, it took me a while to care about this Wolverine, and I'm still not sure how much I actually do because when Logan died, I said goodbye to that character. And this one is almost too similar to the Logan that we got in Logan. Like, if they had a slightly different take on it, I think I would have been more into it.
I
But
don't
because it was very similar to an old man Logan who's trying to chase his, you know, bad times away with booze and he's having difficulties with the claws and stuff like that. It's a little similar.
I don't really agree with you on that one because the Logan we saw in Logan was an old man Logan-ish and obviously enjoyed his booze as Logan does. But that Logan was caring for Charles Xavier and doing everything he could for that. Whereas this Logan was dejected, wanted nothing to do with his past, wanted to drink his sorrows away and do nothing else in life. And I think it's a very clear difference from the Logan that we saw.
I think it also gets into with the whole multiverse stuff and pulling variants out and like if you want to compare it to Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 with Gamora, I didn't necessarily care about Gamora in that movie, but what I cared about when it came to her character was Peter's grief
Mm,
and dealing with that character.
mhm.
And while we did get a smidge of that in this movie, that's what carried that variant for me.
You don't think that the tie-in did the same
You
thing here?
idiot. We try to not say that until
She's
spoilers,
in
and
the
that's why
trailer.
I know, but I haven't said her name yet.
Okay, so you can cut that if you want. Let me redo.
Yeah,
You don't think that the character tie-in we get here
it
was
helped.
similar to
It
that?
it helped.
Okay. All
It
right.
helped,
All
but
right.
it didn't have the same thing for me.
All right, fair enough.
Also, um, a lot of the send-offs, like these emotional, like, well, these characters didn't get send-offs. I don't think a lot of them needed send-offs. A couple of them just flat out stunk. And while it's funny that we brought them back, it wasn't like something like, oh, I wish they gave so and so their comeuppance or their flowers because they needed it. Where like even when it came to like the Deadpool and Logan stuff, we've already gotten a really good send-off to Logan in the past. With Deadpool, we didn't really get anything there either. But I don't want to get into any of the spoiler stuff there. But the whole thing though is that this story is pretty simple. It's a pretty easy buddy cop going across the desert trying to solve this issue, get back to the home. And so what I like about that is that they didn't overcomplicate what the story is. They just left it open for fun. They left it open for these two actors to play their characters, to bring in other fun characters, and just let them have fun and let us have fun with them. And I think that's what I appreciate the most about this movie, where The story isn't the best, the ending isn't the best, but that's not what I'm here for. I'm here for these two characters on the screen, and that's what they gave us. It's a fun ride with that. There's tons of fight scenes. They take a lot of shots at Disney, and I really appreciate that. Disney was willing to take those shots. Reynolds and Jackman are great in this movie. Credit to all the action, because I want to say this is that I think everything in this movie is done in the daylight. It's all
Mm.
bright. You can see exactly what's happening in every single fight scene. Sometimes it does look a little computer generated and a little bit wonky, but I don't care because they give you so much of it, and so much of it looks amazing.
Yeah, and just by doing that, it has shit on every DC movie
Yeah.
ever.
So, with all that said, Mac, I have this. I settled on 35. 35 was right where I was at. But then I looked at my MCU, and I think I would take it over the first Avengers movie, which I think I had at 36, and that's at number 10.
Mhm.
And then also right around like Black Panther. So I would have it anywhere from 10 to 12 with the first Avengers and with Black Panther. But then above, say, a WandaVision, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, Doctor Strange. But I would have it below Iron Man.
That's a very similar range to me. Let me read. So I'll read you the 7 movies that I have ahead of it to give you an
Yes.
idea of what that those top 2 tiers are. So of course, Infinity War, Guardians, Endgame. Then I have Thor Ragnarok kind of starting that second tier with Black Panther,
Yeah.
Homecoming, and Winter Soldier. And then I either have Deadpool and Wolverine right there at the end of that tier, or starting the next tier where I have that, Guardians 2, Love and Thunder, I still enjoy quite a
Mhm.
bit. The first Avengers movie, I have that 11th. Guardians Volume 3,
Oh,
is that right there?
that's enough.
Um,
That's
yeah,
enough.
at 12. So, and
Yeah.
then actually No Way Home at 13. So No Way Home might end that tier that this starts, but roughly in the same tier, I think.
Yeah. And so like the only show that I would, first off, is X-Men the animated series an MCU show? Are we calling it that?
I don't know yet. I don't think
So
it
I would
is.
have that above this
I
as
don't
well.
think
I
it is.
I loved X-Men the animated series.
97.
Um, and like I have Loki above it on my tiering, but I've always said this, movies over television. So give me that.
Loki and Hawkeye would be just behind this, but in the conversation for sure.
And then I have it number 2 on the year. But that's it's not only because, but I do think that there is quite a gap between Dune 2 and then say The Fall Guy and Twisters. Like,
It's been
so
a
it's gonna fall right in between.
pretty Mets year
Yeah.
for movies, that's for sure.
Mac, should we start spoiling?
Spoilers, spoilers,
Spoilers, spoilers.
spoiler
Let's
alert.
jump back. That's a
If
rewind
it's your
feature I
favorite
just did.
vignette.
To the Plemonade. And the Plemonade needs to go to the idea to put this guy in the movie, to know exactly all of the turmoil that went on off screen, write that into the character, and also Channing Tatum playing Gambit. Because the, let's say, 15 minutes that he's in the movie, he fucking kills it.
Yep, Channing Tatum finally gets his chance to play Gambit. They've been talking about a Gambit movie for I don't know 10 years, 8 years now, and Channing Tatum does I think as good of a job as anyone could have done being this fun, goofy version of
Yeah.
Gambit, and also knowing that this is probably what he was kind of workshopping for the character too,
Yeah.
is like very funny. And
Well, so there were
there's
always,
everything that came out of his mouth
yes.
was fucking hysterical.
Because there were always stories of like, well, he's having a tough time with the dialect, or they're having a tough time with the tone of the movie, or when the movie was canceled, went into like a bit of like a character depression type of thing because it was never going to be made, and they put all of that into the movie.
Yeah, it was perfect. And
Yeah,
I even mostly expected to see this character based off what I had read, and it was still so awesome to finally see it. See him in that uniform, see him use his powers, which
the
was super
headpiece
cool. Yeah.
killed me.
Yeah, oh, it was fucking great. I
Oh
just
my god.
I like I guess I should have figured they would have gone this route with it instead of like a super serious Gambit. But I'm telling you right now that this is the funniest character I've seen on screen in a long time. It was so fucking good. So
That
funny.
and Deadpool's reaction to him was so funny. Like, that absolutely that scene in the little hut there,
The
where
lair, the cave.
first off, beside Gambit, we also got Elektra, but we were kind of expecting Elektra, and we got fucking Blade.
Yes. Ugh, Wesley Snipes as Blade, which I did not expect at all. And
No,
again,
I didn't either.
reading stuff online, I'm sure I might have come across his name or his character, but it was not one of the top options.
Mhm.
And man, was it so satisfying to see him play Blade again. Just to see Blade in general was satisfying,
Yes.
and have it be Wesley Snipes was so fucking good. And of course, um, and by the way, we were in a theater with, I don't know, maybe like 40 critics, whatever you want to say. Legitimate pop for Wesley
Yeah.
Snipes. Like,
Mhm.
so I haven't seen Wesley Snipes in anything in years, never mind as fucking Blade. So that was really good. But two things I thought were
Mhm.
great here. Um, and one maybe really meaningful going forward. Maybe we can touch back at the end. He says, matter of factly, there will only ever be one Blade, and Deadpool looks directly at the camera. Is
Yeah.
that Kevin Feige telling us, hey, Mahershala Ali's Blade is fucking dead, gone?
Possibly. Possibly, because they also, they've talked about downsizing their, schedules and stuff
Yeah,
too,
that
so
was very purposefully done.
and I think my favorite joke from the Blade stuff is when he tells Deadpool/Ryan Reynolds that, "I never liked you," because Ryan Reynolds was in Blade
Trinity.
Trinity, and, Patton Oswalt always tells stories of, like, how crazy Wesley Snipes was on that movie, and how he didn't like to be upstaged, and a young Ryan Reynolds would do that.
Yeah. So another perfect tie-in with the character there. And then Goo, of course, the fourth member of this Void team of Elektra, Blade, and Gambit is none other than X-23, played
Mhm,
again by Daphne Keene, a much older Daphne Keene. She looks like a woman now compared to a child she did in 2017. And she ends up playing a pretty vital role in this movie, both
mhm.
emotionally and motivations, and in the big fight scene, albeit, I guess a brief 15 or 20 minutes, but a very vital 15 or 20 minutes.
Right, and I would have loved it if they didn't have her come into the hut, and then she showed up later, and then she walked down there to Wolverine when he's sitting by himself, and that's, like, the first time that you see her, and then she gives him that speech.
Fair enough. Again,
That
like,
but I'm also splitting hairs there, but
yeah,
my main thing with that character is I wish they didn't put her in the fucking trailer.
I can agree with you on that one character. I do think that's the one that we definitely all expected to get though. So like I don't think at that point they were really holding anything back. That's why I don't think it was that big of a spoiler or not to say her name earlier. But she wasn't in the IMDb credit, so clearly
Ah.
they were trying to hold her back a little bit. But she's she's
Jennifer
also
Gardner
she's also
sorry, go
doing
ahead.
media for the movie as well. So
Jennifer Gardner also gave us a great line of, "Oh, is there a Daredevil here?" And she goes, "Nope.
yeah, and they're like, oh, sorry. She goes, no, it's okay.
No, it's okay." That's a of course, Ben Affleck, her
Yeah,
former
a
husband.
great Garner Affleck
Yes.
Daredevil Electric joke.
And then I think the second best cameo would be Chris Evans, and they want you to believe that maybe that's Captain America.
Yeah,
No, no, no. And granted, I could kind of tell from the start by the way he was talking, but Johnny Storm.
yeah. Chris Evans reprising his role as Johnny Storm from the two Fantastic Four movies from the 2000s, and they do a great job masking it for about a minute as he's
Yeah.
in these tatters in the void. You see a little glimpse of red from something. I don't know what he had on there. And then his first, like, I don't know, 5 lines of dialogue are Cap-ish, and
Mhm.
Deadpool Wade's getting excited to fight with Cap. Turns out he's Johnny Storm. Flame on, shoots into the sky, and has a very brief, shine very briefly brightly.
I also loved because before Chris Evans became Captain America, he always played this dickheadish character
Yeah,
in almost every
not
one of his
another teen
movies,
movie.
but he dialed right into that pre-Cap character
Yeah, it
perfectly.
was effortless.
Every single line was delivered just like a pre-2009 Chris
He
Evans.
felt like Johnny Storm. It was
Yep,
fucking great. It was
I
brilliant.
loved it.
And then
I loved it.
Goo, yet another, I guess this might be the top cameo for some folks as well.
Yeah.
And a massive shot at the DC universe is Henry Cavill pops up as a Wolverine variant for, I don't know, 8 seconds
Also,
here.
credit to Henry Cavill, bigger than Hugh Jackman,
Bigger.
like,
He is
noticeably
bigger and wider.
fucking giant.
Huge. Fucking
Holy
massive.
smokes.
Huge. Great fucking scene.
But I'll also say this, is that not having Daniel Radcliffe in this, do you think that hints that maybe he's a Wolverine in the future and they didn't want to blow their load on
I
this?
think there's something to that, or that
Okay.
idea of they wanted to limit who plays the variants to keep their
Yeah.
options open going forward.
Kind of like in Multiverse of Madness, how they had John Krasinski in there and then they just said, well, that was a fun little cameo.
Yeah, like knowing he wasn't going to be there going forward, so we'll waste him
Yeah.
here. And I think that's the same with Cavill. Another one here that maybe someone could have picked up on screen. This I didn't read
And
until
I was
later.
looking for this actor the entire movie because him and Ryan Reynolds are great friends off screen.
Yeah, Rob McElhenney, obviously Always Sunny, and they own Wrexham together. They
Wrexham.
spend lots of time together. He apparently plays one of the TVA soldiers in here, which is a fun little nod. It's like Daniel Craig
Mhm.
playing a stormtrooper. They must have had his face covered though, because I didn't notice him at all.
And then outside of Gambit, because Gambit made me laugh almost every single line. I lolled, I cackled, I had a good old fun time.
The word that killed me for a full minute, and I was trying to contain my laughter because it was not a pretty empty theater, so you could hear people
Yeah.
snickering the way I
Yeah.
was, is in this big, massive moment in the Honda Odyssey, right before Deadpool and Wolverine get into their second fight. Wolverine tells him to say one more word. And then there's like a 8-second pause, which makes you believe he's finally going to shut up and not say
Mhm.
anything. And he utters the word gubernatorial, which is just like that's an incredibly funny word to say and hear. And whoever came up with that, I don't know if it was Reynolds in the moment that brought, I'm sure they did 40 takes there. That couldn't have been, you can't find a funnier word to say in that moment. It was fucking incredible. It was so good. Another one that killed me was towards the end of the movie when we had Nice Pool, who we'll get to in a couple seconds as well. He goes, I can break the fourth wall too. And he turns to the camera and just goes, the proposal.
I think my favorite line of the movie is when Eliath first shows up and Deadpool goes, "That's from Loki season 1 episode 5."
Yeah. That was a great one as well. And then at the
Yeah.
very beginning, actually, at his birthday party, when the guy that wasn't supposed to speak
Yeah.
utters a line, he goes, what? Are you fucking improvising? Like, what are
Yeah.
you doing?
He's an extra. He's not allowed to talk. We don't
Yeah.
want to pay you for this movie.
Yeah. And then they also did a really good job with that one TVA tech, just like fawning over both Deadpool and Wolverine. That was some
Yeah.
really good stuff too.
Also in the movie, Deadpool gets Johnny Storm killed by claiming that Johnny said this stuff about Cassandra Nova. And the entire movie, Logan's like, "You got him fucking killed. He didn't say any of that shit." And then the post-credit scene is Deadpool showing a tape of Chris Evans saying word for word in the Johnny Storm voice the exact same thing.
Like a minute straight of insults, which was like
Yeah.
so hard to believe. So I love that they called back to that. It was a great post credit.
They also said something about sending her to bald hell,
Yeah.
which I thought was so fucking funny.
A couple other things in here, Goo. I guess one more thing before we really get into the nitty gritty stuff is maybe the major jumping off point for the movie and for the Deadpool character was Deadpool going back in time to 2018 and applying to,
And Earth 616.
yeah, on our sacred timeline, Earth
Yeah.
616, and trying to apply for the Avengers. And he meets
Yeah.
with Happy Hogan, and Happy Hogan just kind of okay buddies him and ushers him out. And that's sort of how we end up in the Deadpool story. That's really the motivation to go from there.
Yeah, there was that, and then him retiring the character.
Yeah. Yep.
Also, credit to Goostradamus. After seeing the first trailer, I pointed out that it looks like Wade and Vanessa are no longer together. And everyone said, "Goo, how are you picking that up?" I did.
They all said that. Uh,
Everyone said
Goose,
that.
speaking of our sacred timeline and the MCU going forward, at the end of this movie, we see Logan and X-23 in Earth 1000 or 10,005 with Deadpool and friends. So where do we see them next? Do we see them next? Because they're not in our sacred timeline. They're not on Earth 616. What's going to happen with them going forward?
That's a good question because I do think Deadpool moving forward, if you're gonna use the character, because I also would be okay if this was just his final movie. I think this is a good way to go out. But if he's in another movie, it's gonna have to be a team up with, say, a Spider-Man, maybe?
Yeah, you're right. There's only so many ways they can go about it now. So I wonder. I think the character we have a chance of seeing most from this movie is probably X-23. She's the one that makes the most
I
sense.
would love to see her again.
That would be
Yes.
great, and she did a great job. And I loved how in the big fight scene, her costume was just the glasses back
She put
on
the
to
glasses on,
call
she
back to
still had the
Logan.
backpack.
So good.
Uh, I was glad the backpack, it had a purpose. It was to put Juggernaut's helmet in there.
Yep, yep.
Um,
Not a bad
I
plan
also
either. I don't mind that.
she's also just so good at just scream grunting
Yeah,
as she runs.
yeah.
Great.
Oh, yeah, so those 2 characters are Cassandra Nova and Paradox. So, Paradox not having the oversight from the TVA wasn't believable to me. That hurt this movie a little
Because he
bit.
also needed 3 days to get his plan going.
Yeah, well, you have 72 hours. And I'm like, all right,
Yeah.
fine. He's building this fucking world eating machine, whatever the hell they called it. Second to that, I liked the motivation that Cassandra Nova gets double crossed by Paradox, and really she's the big bad of this movie. I don't like that she immediately wants to go and just kill
I
like
guess
every
I'll go
universe.
kill every world.
Yeah, that wasn't great
And
either.
then how she ends the movie after being, I think, like a pretty cool character up until she goes to 10,005. Like, as soon as she gets there, she just attaches herself to a machine.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a little bit weak. It did give us a nice Deadpool and Wolverine scene, and it
No,
was
but I also didn't love that one either because I mean, that's just kind of like the comic booky ending once again.
sure, sure, but I
But
like
the
the idea.
journey to get there was pretty good.
Yeah, I like the idea though that they get told like no one being can handle the matter and the antimatter, but they used 2 beings, so they came out together and really like underscores like the point of the whole movie. So I was okay with that part. Um, I'm interested to see like so this didn't end up really being a soft launch for the X-Men and the MCU, which I expected a little bit of that. Maybe X-23 is the soft launch here. But that's something like going forward, we're still left wondering about.
Mhm.
And additionally, which I kind of alluded to before, the X-Men cameo we get in Deadpool 2, those X-Men technically weren't the X-Men we actually knew. They were just variants of the ones that we knew.
Great point.
Yeah.
Great point.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
By the way, there is a Wolverine variant montage
Mm.
that I absolutely loved. Obviously, we talked about Cavill, but we also get different Wolverines from the comics. Like we have the crucified Wolverine.
Oh, I
We
forgot
have
about
the
him.
we have the giant back alley Wolverine.
Yep.
And I had to explain to Dana, my wife, and I'm like, yeah, comics got real fucking weird for a while.
Yeah, he was like an 80s. There was synth pop playing. I didn't know who that variant was.
Mhm.
The one that was probably the most satisfying for fans was the Wolverine in the brown and yellow suit fighting Hulk. And he
Yes,
pops
that
right
was
in.
great.
Ruffalo's Hulk, also,
Mhm.
by the way. We get the comic accurate short Wolverine, which
Mhm.
was very, very funny because the way they
That
shoot
was
it
good.
in the first few seconds, you don't think he's as
Because
shorty
I
as he
thought
is.
that might have been Radcliffe at first.
Yeah, yeah, and, then we also get the patch Wolverine, which everyone seemingly loves from the comics. I don't
Yeah.
really know anything about him. Also, we get the character of Nicepool, who pops up a couple times in here, which is Ryan Reynolds playing him as Ryan Reynolds, non-burned Ryan Reynolds with long hair and the Canadian accent. I thought he was a really fun addition to the movie too.
Yeah, and also with this Wolverine, he is the worst of all the Wolverines, and I didn't think he was that much different than the rest of the Wolverines.
I
Obviously,
think
he had the backstory of he was responsible for his X-Men being killed because he tried to distance himself from them. He had a drinking issue. He got back to the house. He hid this part from X-23, but he also, after his X-Men got killed, he went on a giant murder spree
yeah.
where he didn't just kill the bad guys, he killed a ton of people.
I think what you're really overlooking is the fact that this Wolverine didn't have anything to go back to or anything to redeem himself with in his world, whereas other Wolverines might go through similar emotional lows, but always have something or some means to redeem themselves. And this Wolverine didn't have that.
He had alcohol.
In the beginning of the third act, the big fight scene in front of Giant Man, which was also great, a nice
Yeah.
Paul Rudd joke we got in there. Um, we get all of Nova's slaves, cronies, and I know there's going to be a lot of fun cameos in there.
Yeah.
Some we already got a lot from trailers and breakdowns there. Juggernaut was pretty notable. They used Juggernaut's helmet there. Um, then we jump to Earth 10,005, whatever the fuck it's called, and we get the fight scene between Deadpool, Logan, and the 100 Deadpools. And presumably, I think she was credited Blake Lively
Yes.
voices Lady Deadpool. Um, I'm guaranteeing a couple other of those voices had to have been notable, but I didn't catch them in the credits, so
One of
I'm
them
not
is
sure.
Matthew McConaughey.
You sure?
Matthew McConaughey was,
The
Cowboy
cowboy one?
Deadpool.
Okay,
Yes.
alright, that's fun as well. The baby infant Deadpool was pretty fun, and I also really liked that all Deadpools have a Peter and they celebrate Peter, which is the way that all these Deadpools stop
Peter,
fighting
Peter,
our heroes.
Peter. Which is a bit of like, uh, how are we gonna get out of this situation? This?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Sure.
But it works for a Deadpool movie, you know? It doesn't work for most other
It
movies.
doesn't work for other ones, but
Yeah.
it does work for this. Some notable characters or actors that were not seen here is either of the Professor X's,
Mhm.
either of the Magnetos, and then Brolin as Cable. I'm actually surprised that they didn't have Michael B. Jordan as Johnny Storm as well, and then you have two Johnny Storms.
Yeah,
Also, two actors that are in the MCU.
yeah, yeah, that would have actually been pretty funny. And on the Brolin Cable thing, they could have done a Chris Evans thing there where they could have
Yeah,
made a reference to like, so you played
Thanos.
2 characters in the
Yeah.
MCU?
And then so Magneto is referenced, and that's actually one of the funnier pieces of dialogue in the movie too. Of where's Magneto? We need Magneto. And they're like, oh man, he's dead.
Yeah,
Where's his helmet? It was destroyed.
yeah, Cassandra Nova killed him and then melted his helmet.
Yeah,
Fuck!
that was pretty funny. Cyclops was mentioned several times. Logan gave a couple stories with, Scott. Oh, Scott always wanted me to wear this costume. I did like that story.
That was
Scott
nice.
always
That
wanted
was
me
a
to wear
good
this
touch.
costume. I thought it was stupid. And since they're all gone now, I wear it everywhere.
Yeah, I thought the 2 best scenes, the 2 best monologues that I was pointing out, obviously, when he tells a bit of his backstory before you learn the whole thing to Deadpool in the Odyssey, right before they fight. It's like 2 minutes of a Hugh Jackman tour de force, and then the scene down outside the lair with him and Daphne Keene was fucking
Mhm.
great. She does a good job. He does an amazing job. And I felt like those 2 scenes really, like, tied the movie together, made it just kicked it up enough for me to, like, go from borderline liking it to loving it because it just needed that emotional gravitas, and
And
I
like I
felt
said,
like Jackman
that
brought it.
did help me. That did help me with that Logan, with that Wolverine.
Mm, totally agreed.
It just wasn't maybe as far as you went. And then also, what was the other thing? I was just gonna say something and you ruined it. Oh, when he popped the mask on.
Oh, right. How
Oh
could we
my
forget?
god.
How could we forget?
Oh my god.
Finally, we
Because
see
I forgot about the mask
I
at that
totally
point of
did.
the movie. And then he's
Yeah,
like, wait 1 second. And he flipped the hood over.
yeah,
You're like,
amazing.
fuck!
Amazing,
Fuck!
so good. So they fight all those Deadpools while he's wearing the mask, and that was really cool and very, very satisfying to see because of all the versions of Logan and Wolverine we've seen in the past, he has never donned a mask, not
No,
once. So
you
finally,
can't hide that face.
yeah, finally we get that for a scene, and it was great. Great way they did it too, just pulling it out from the back. It was fucking awesome.
I also can't talk enough about just how much I love how everything was done in the daylight and you could see everything that was happening. You could see all the blood splattering because in every single one of these fights, all of these heroes have sharp swords, guns, claws, and they were just limb chomping.
Yeah, and a very important thing actually to note as well is Deadpool now has adamantium katanas, and that seems like it's going to be a pretty big plot point in the next MCU movie we see is a battle over adamantium from Tiamat
I
in
say,
Brave
is
New
that the
World.
first time that they've said adamantium in?
Yes, first
So
time they've. Yep,
there's our X-Men.
yeah, there you go. So
Na, na, na,
that's
na,
a
na,
tie-in
na.
right there.
There we go. Max, should we do a little timelining here?
No, I don't think we need to. This
Well,
is
I do want to talk about, okay, well, let's skip over some
all
crap
right.
then. But
You could jump around then. Do
I
you?
do like how the movie starts out with him digging up Logan's body
Great scene. Great
and
scene.
then using his adamantium spine to kill TVA members to NSYNC's Bye Bye Bye.
Yeah, we one of the things we said, and one of the things most people were going into this movie with was like, please don't mess with the legacy from
Yeah.
Logan. And they jump immediately into it. And I was like, but the minute he starts beating the shit out of people with the adamantium skeleton, I was like, oh, okay, I'm in.
And then also, so I thought the scene was going on too long, but then it went on so long that it came back around to being funny again.
Yeah, and each
Also,
kill was
such
different than the prior one.
such a cool image too, and I'm hoping that they make something with this, some kind of a probably not a pop, but like a figure of Deadpool with the claws on his
Yeah,
hands
I don't know
Because
how he
even
got
when
the
he popped
claws
me,
to
he's like,
come out.
"Ha!" Then
I
he
don't know
stabs himself.
I don't know how he got him to pop, but it was still a cool scene.
Let me see here. We went through the variants. We went through the worst Wolverine. Um, them in the Void. I enjoyed them in the Void. They were able to get to know each other. We got several great fight scenes in the Void, in the van, and then also out in the desert. You're the 20th Century Fox logo, and they got was it a Honda Odyssey?
Yeah, Honda Odyssey was nice Pool's car with the coexist sign. Actually, Goo, another note
Yeah.
about Paradox here too. Like,
Yes.
there's no like, what's Paradox's end game? Also, like, why does he want to prune these worlds so quickly, even though they're going to die anyways? Like, what's the fucking point there?
Did he
That's
say
never really
something?
explained. I
I
thought.
think he said something about wanting to like be in charge of like his version of the TVA.
I guess, but again, that doesn't jive with the end of Loki season 2. It just doesn't really work for me.
Yeah, we did all of this stuff. We did a great job talking about this movie. I'll tell you
Yeah,
that much.
yeah,
Pyro, how about him? He's got gross teeth.
yeah, yeah. It's
I also
Pyro.
love when he walked in to talk to Cassandra and she goes, "Not everyone gets to talk."
Yeah, yeah, because or I think Wolverine said that maybe, right?
I think at one point, no, I think
Because
she
she
said it
shuts
to
him
him.
down, and I think he might have said that. But either way, you thought you were gonna get this shitty villain montage, and then they just shut him up right away. That was great.
Also, I wouldn't mind if they found a way to bring back not this Cassandra Nova. She gets obliterated and spaghettied. But she's a pretty cool character, and I wouldn't mind her with a Charles or
Yeah,
with a Magneto, where she's a little more lenient on like what she'll do. Also, I did like the Wolverine speech of because she said, "Oh, Charles must have loved you," and he goes, "No, Charles loved everybody."
yeah, yeah. There was another good fucking Jackman scene there, where Wade wants to kill her. He's like, no, and that's ultimately why she helps them, with the Paradox double cross. The way that X-23 gets Juggernaut's helmet was fucking awesome.
Yeah,
She just slices him off at the ankles, grabs the helmet, like that was fucking great. And that just goes. We didn't even spend much time on the kills and the gore. There's so much of it in this movie. It's like hard to point to one or two things. It's in almost every scene. Like the fight scene between Deadpool and Wolverine in the Odyssey was fucking
yes.
incredible.
Mhm.
And then
That's where he lost his sleeves too.
yeah, and then the shot of Deadpool all tied up in the seatbelt was
Yeah.
great. And then you see the Electra boots, like really good introduction of those Void characters. They did a really good job kind of flowing from one thing to another.
Also, and I know that we already talked about Wesley Snipes in this movie, but seeing Blade fight Azazel,
Yeah,
fucking great.
so
Seeing
good.
Blade fight the devil,
So
and
good.
they kept that same like the propeller, like three-sided throwing thing to it. Like it I there's such great fan service in this
Yeah.
movie.
I actually was a little disappointed we didn't get bigger swords with Blade. He kind of used that smaller thing for most of the
Mhm.
fight scene. I would have liked to have seen that. And like a Blade Deadpool team up is just inherently really cool.
Dear God. I had like coming out of the movie, I was like, as a movie, how do I feel about this movie? And then I'm like, there's so much fun in this.
Yeah.
There is just so
Yeah.
many laughs, so much great action, so much violence, so much every reference is it's made for us.
Yeah. And they also like at the end when they are, trying to break the Time Ripper, that was a good scene, good back and forth between Logan and Wade about who's going to be the hero. Wade tricks him. Also, we get the B-15 cameo, by the way, with the
Yeah.
TVA stuff. There was that. A good little callback to the Avengers where Wade and
Shawarma.
Logan are eating shawarma at the end there. It was just, they hit on so many good notes. And again, you and I didn't care for most of the villain motivations or the story on the in
Yeah.
between, but the shit that we got to see on screen was so good that we
Also,
basically get to overlook that.
what I appreciated too, because for a second I was like, "Oh, is this how X-23 is gonna go out? She's gonna die in the void."
Hmm.
But they pulled her out at the end and had her in that final scene, and that made me happy.
Yeah, which means she survived Eliath, but maybe the other ones didn't. I don't know. I didn't
Yeah.
question that too much.
Yeah, right. Which means that she is now like maybe not in this world, but she could be pulled into whatever Avengers stuff
Yeah, some
happens.
Young Avengers thing or something like that.
Um, in Logan, I know that she spoke Spanish.
Yeah, mostly.
In this, she speaks very good English.
Clean English. And so, I wonder what what time it is in the MCU right now, maybe 2026 or something like that,
Mhm.
and Logan is set in what?
It's noon.
Logan
It's
is
half past dusk.
well, Logan's also set in the future too.
It was set in 2030, I believe.
Yeah, so that's interesting, and she also, like, yeah, I don't it's a good point about that. Yeah, yeah.
All right, I guess let's talk about the future.
Let's get into Maxac.
And Maxac could be anything. It could be a boat. And one of the, it seems like every reviewer that likes this movie, one of the tags that keeps on being used over and over again is that this is a shot in the arm or it's going to reinvigorate the MCU. Where do you fall on that?
It's hard for me to agree with that statement because this was almost adjacent to the MCU.
And
How
it's also so much different than all the other movies. And it's also, I'm sorry to step on you here, but this has like really bothered me after seeing the movie is that this is a rated R, super rated R movie that they're not going to continue to do. So it's not like they can take this business model and roll with it. Also, you can only do movies like this every so often. And I feel like they're kind of running out of these legacy characters that they can just pull back and do this with.
That's all of that is true, but there is something to be said about how successful this movie is seemingly going to be, and that maybe giving them a little more leeway to do more of this type of stuff in the universe. But again, it's hard to say that it reinvigorates the MCU because there's a chance we see none of these characters going forward.
Yeah.
I hope that's not the case. I hope we get at least X-23, maybe Jackman again, maybe Reynolds again. Um, but it is encouraging to see that they can still deliver at pretty much the highest level, even when things have been kind of going south. I think for someone to say that they've reinvigorated the MCU, I think Brave New World needs to hit because that's really going to be like the jumping off
A
point.
movie
It
that's
seems like,
more in the style
yeah,
of what they've been doing, but
in the current
also, yes,
timeline.
but also finding a new style within it, not just
Sure,
being a copycat of what they've done in the past.
yeah, but it is encouraging, and it's a good point you made for this movie. Most of the set pieces and action took place in very bright, vivacious
Yes.
areas, and it seems like Brave New World's going to do a lot of that as well. So we'll see how that goes.
Okay. So if you made it to this point in the podcast, I salute you, Cap.
Is that February for Brave New World?
Yes. Also in this movie, by the way, when that was Thor holding Deadpool, which is a really funny callback every time that he said it.
Yeah.
That was Hemsworth's brother, right? Like that was the actor
Oh,
Thor. It wasn't.
I didn't. You know what? I didn't notice.
It looked like from Ragnarok when it was Hemsworth's brother holding Matt Damon.
Yeah, I thought it was Chris Hemsworth, but it could have been Luke. Definitely could have been Luke.
Because I think that's what made me laugh about it. And then every time he's like, "Why is Thor holding me?"
That also seems like that was an Easter egg too, right? Like that might be something that happens in a future movie.
But I'm also curious, like, what other characters you could possibly have like this comedic styling with,
Right.
and you besides maybe Spider-Man, you can't.
Yeah, there's not many for sure. It'd have to be a real spastic like maybe Moon Knight they could bring out to this level. I just don't know anything about Moon Knight. It just seems like he could maybe operate in this uh type of atmosphere.
All right, Mac, where can the people find
You can
us?
find us on Twitter and on Instagram at Mac and Goo Podcast. Every other platform we are Mac ampersand Goo. It's Mac Shift 7 Goo. That includes Facebook, Stitcher, TuneIn, Castbox, Spreaker, Google Play, iHeartRadio.
iHeartRadio.
We're on Spotify, but more importantly on Apple Podcasts. Get on there, rate, review us 5 stars, subscribe. If you do that, we'll get you a free Mac and Goo t-shirt from the folks over at Watertown Sportswear. That's Watertown Sportswear on 34 Mount Auburn Street in Watertown. WatertownSportswear.com, expert screen printing and embroidery.
tpublic.com.
Merch.
Tell your Alexa to play Mac and Goo on your iHeartRadio app.
Hey, Alexa, play Mac and Goo.
On the iHeartRadio app.
Hey Siri, play Mac and Goo.
Siri.
Yeah, maybe a
All
phone's
right,
listening.
whatever. We're gonna wrap up this episode.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to go and think for a bit. And then we're going to go and record our next episode that's going to come out on Monday. What is the topic of our next episode?
Yeah, we'll be talking Twisters.
Hell
Twisters,
yeah!
the movie that has dominated the box office for the last
If
couple
you
weeks.
feel it, ride it. I think that's the saying.
Little peek behind the curtain here. You liked that movie more than I did.
I
sure.
love dumb fun.
I argue about how fun that movie really was.
I'm doing the tornado wrangler thing right now.
I also, by the way, you have to go back and collect your thoughts. I have more notes on that than you do already.
I don't need notes. I have, yeah, if you feel it, ride it. And I
Okay.
have the tornado wrangler. Those are my only thoughts
All
on the
right.
movie. And that's really all I needed.
All right. Good
Also, just going to suck up some diapers.
Big diaper guy.
Big diaper movie. Tuesdays or Goose-days, I abuse kangaroos.
Bye.
Tim Burton.
Please flip the cassette over to side B to continue the adventure.
Now it's time for girls jumping on trampolines.